The ogre sat upon his garbage throne atop his garbage mountain, trying his best not to be garbage. He decided it'd be best if he put his newfound ability of remembering his past to use. He thought long and hard about right and wrong, when and if blame is needed, and other possible issues the people might bring to the mountaintop. Most importantly, he thought about what is fair. He definitely wanted a world much fairer than it had ever been in his lifetimes. With Camelman having given him a new shearing, our friend was starting to feel a bit like the old jovial ogre he once was. Sure, he still found himself staring into the sky a lot, wringing Lady Baghead's bag in his hands, wondering where she was and how she was doing, but at least he had something to take his mind off it for a bit. With the fate of humanity about to be in the beast's hands, he could finally prove he was right about the way he thought things should be. The man-camel, having brought Skulk back to as normal a state as he could, sat by his side and lit up the largest spoon he ever fired up. His eyes grew bigger than Skulk's stomach. As he plunged a dirty needle into his even dirtier arm, he felt elated, then empty, then sick. The poison crept through his body like ink in water as he stared dumbly at Skulk, vision tunneling, and nodded off into a forever nap. While Skulk was finally finding a brighter side to things, and Camelman was just kinda laying there, a group deep in the recesses of the city that is always falling apart was having a much different realization.
God! Is our God in our hearts? Find! We must find why she departs!
Search the city for what caused this change, and then fix the thing that made us deranged.
And what will be seen? Why, the return of our queen!
Yeah, the followers of Baghead got real weird after their eyes and ears got sucked into their heads. In fact, they got downright obsessive, talking to themselves in far weirder verse than Camelman ever did, counting and recounting the number of teeth in their mouths. They even began to touch every inch of wall, ceiling, and floor, believing one must know their own confines before stepping out of them.
Yes.
Real nutbags.
Here it is. The end of the road.
Though, in honor of Skulk's new commitment to fairness, if any of us had to deal with our eyes and ears being sucked into our heads, I bet we'd get pretty weird ourselves. They had decided to stop referring to themselves as the followers of Baghead, seeing as they had nothing to follow anymore. No, these crazed pinhole vision lunatics now rose out of their dungeons as the cabal of Baghead. And though their wants were the same, Skulk and the cabal, in the coming end, would be the undoing of each other. Meanwhile, a large group of citizens gathered at the mountaintop to hear the ogre's first decree. Tired, strung out, and sickly thin from only drinking and doing drugs, the citizenry had begun to lose their minds a bit as well. With such short-term cares, not a single person recognized Skulk as the one they killed only a few years back. The beast was feeling good about his first attempt to salvage the wreck known as human life. The beast smiled at the crowd and felt confident about his initial edict as the city's new leader. After all, it seemed to be the easiest of choices. The people didn't want to be forced to party anymore, so the beast gave them just that. Trying to play it cool and show he's one of them, he nonchalantly told everyone,
"It's cool if you don't want to party."
He leaned back in his chair, shrugged his shoulders, and explained,
"You live the way you want. Just be fair. MBD."
The beast was feeling good about his first attempt to salvage the wreck known as human life. He listened to what the people asked for and delivered on their wants. Plus, he got through a whole afternoon not thinking about Lady Baghead. The city cheered despite being confused about what NBD meant, and they removed their long oppressive shackles and celebrated in honor of the decision. Yep, the city literally did the same fucking thing that they were saying they no longer wanted to do. They drank, they partied, and they fucked. Though in fairness again, they were doing it all with happiness and vigor once more. During this time, the Cabal watched from the shadows of crumbling towers as the people made the same stupid mistakes. Having removed the bags from their heads so their beady eyes could see better, they followed each and every move, trying to gather pieces to the puzzle that led them to their current state. These men and women had a purpose now. Sure, they had purpose back when they ran the city, but back then they were filled with Lady Baghead's desires and getting fat off it. But when you lose it all, man, only then do you know what real drive is. The celebrating not having to celebrate celebration ended exactly as expected as the citizens quickly grew tired. After months of deaths, babies, and especially uninspired sex, the citizens that survived Party 2.0 again set up the mountain to seek advice once more. The Beast, shocked at how quickly the people returned, tried to be a little more heavy-handed this time around. He shed his nonchalant attitude and spoke with seriousness.
Choose to work. Help yourselves.
With a clearer message, the citizens begrudgingly put their helmets back on and attempted to freely choose to do work. This was tougher than expected, however. It took a lot of effort to keep the city that is always falling apart together. Without a whip at their back, many of these people chose to focus on another part of the new law of the land and help themselves to longer breaks and earlier stop times. The way humans can twist words is truly magical. With pretty much everyone having this attitude, eventually piles of trash went from being a little bigger than normal to really fucking big. And as humans do, people started blaming each other for not cleaning up after themselves. The people returned up the mountain a few weeks later with vitriol complaining about each other's efforts. They yelled and screamed at the ogre for giving them such shitty laws. Overwhelmed, the beast decided to give another decree and deliver it in a more biblical nature. He wasn't a big fan of putting bells and whistles on things, but he remembered the people really responded positively to loud, booming oration and the spectacle of movement when the followers of Baghead used those tactics. The ogre stood and roared to get everyone's attention. As he raised Lady Baghead's bag high into the air, in an uncertain ceremonial gesture, he proclaimed,
Look out for each other.
The people wondered what the gesture meant, and what the bag represented, leaving them bewildered. The showmanship had worked in calming the masses, however, and sent them confusedly shuffling back down the crag. The beast wiped his brow and began to realize how hard this position might be. He missed Lady Baghead a lot that day. Sure, by the time the people reached the base of the mountain, a few understood they should help those with less than them. But in a city where you are constantly dodging falling debris and searching for something to eat, most people chose to take the new law to truly mean, look out for each other. The citizens tinkered with their helmets and reversed the direction of vision on their visors. They now were able to watch their backs while they foraged and worked blindly ahead, intent on never letting anyone take advantage of them. A city of blind mice scurrying from debris to debris in hopes of running into food, safety, or help. Although this new way of living provided them means to gain much less, they were happy to protect what extremely little they had. The fact that the average citizen couldn't see what was right in front of them allowed the Cabal of Baghead the liberty of walking around out in the open. As long as the Cabal stayed ahead of whichever citizen was around, no one ever saw the de-Bagheaded ones or saw what had become of them. They cautiously yet pointedly walked about the city they used to run and listened to the people's stories of the past couple years. If their eyes weren't so tiny and sunken into their heads, you'd have seen them light up with excitement when they first caught word of a beast on high carrying a white twine bag that he never let out of sight. The Cabal made their way to the bottom of the trash mountain and hoped for someone to make their way up it. With their sight not what it used to be, they waited for the mob to get frustrated again and shepherd them to the top. It only took a few days before the barking, raving masses trekked up the mountain full of newfound complaints again. The debagged heads followed them up, careful to keep a reasonable distance. Having spent the last couple months getting used to staying one step ahead of the common folk, this proved to be a tough restraint of will. Yet their want of answers far outweighed their want to be ahead, and the Cabal were able to grit their teeth and bear it. Eventually, the citizens reached the top of the mountain, and the de-Bagheaded ones spread out around the peak, staying well out of vision of whatever was up there. As the Cabal sat impatiently listening at the apex of the ridge, the citizens began to complain to someone. The people spoke of their inability to be consistently watching behind them and be able to look forward to accomplish anything. They couldn't believe how dumb the idea they pieced together from what their leader had suggested was, and blamed him for it. The debagged heads crept closer as the scene came into view. The ogre cowered behind his throne, hiding from the group's disdain. His muffled words were barely heard over the clamoring mob. You could kind of hear him say something about, Everyone has faults and weaknesses, but we must learn our neighbors' downfalls insofar as to hope to lighten their load wherever we can. The people hated the number of words coming out of his mouth. They had to think so much just to come to a conclusion on what he meant. As the people filtered down the mountain without any confidence left in their leader, Skulk came out from around his chair and looked down at the ragged bag in his hand as he felt a deep pain in his chest. He missed her more than ever in that moment. He put the bag to his face in hopes of hiding the tears rolling down his cheeks from the few stragglers left. The Cabal nearly shit themselves. It was the ogre they killed from a lifetime ago, and he was holding the bag of their god. Action must be taken. But they were few, and he was pretty big. How much they restrained themselves all day was eating them alive. Yet, they waited for the last of the common folk to leave the mountaintop before heading down the crag themselves. Regrouping at the base of the trash mountain, they began to plot the destruction of this false god, who they believed had killed theirs. The citizens debated, then concluded that, despite not trusting their lord anymore, there was no denying that he was bigger than them. Therefore, he must have some kind of knowledge, according to their illogical human thought. The people heard learn your neighbor's downfalls, paired with something about using the knowledge of those downfalls to lighten their load. Thus, the humans, as they usually did, took something meant to instill moral obligation and turned it into a way to take advantage of others. Many turned one visor eye backwards and one visor eye forward. It gave them incredible headaches, but it showed they had listened to the Ogre King and allowed them to take advantage of the weaknesses others had. Some clever individuals put food out for the ones with the visors set only backwards to run into. And while those lured into the traps ate their measly portions, their pockets of whatever goods they found previously were robbed face to face by the ones who set the traps. The city fell into squalor. On top of the mountain, Skulk was no longer a king. Instead, he was a scapegoat. Skulk was the cause of everyone's pain. He never fought back. In fact, he turned the other cheek to the fury of a dying world. At this point, with everyone being taken advantage of one way or another, and their rage for the ogre on the mountain boiling, the citizens decided to shut the beast out. No one was to go up the crag again. Skulk was to be exiled on his mountaintop. With no one fearing being selfish or immoral any longer, pandemonium set in. Those who had the skills to take advantage of others did. Some set up lending stations where those in need of food or shelter could get immediate help now, but in return, they owed an amount that was ever increasing and impossible to pay back. Some offered to educate others, but only taught them how to regurgitate information that was beneficial to those providing the education. Some made weapons and offered to protect the highest bidder no matter what they needed protecting or attacking. Those without such skills pretended they were choosing a path of righteousness, all while desperately trying to hone any skill that would eventually allow them to take advantage of others. People killed each other for objects or power. Boom tubes were turned to aim inside the city. The city was not only in the exact same state it was in when everyone was partying, but now everyone was at each other's throats as well. The Cabal, on the other hand, wanted to end Skulk and get their god back on her rightful throne. They were excited to see the people's spitefulness of the beast, but needed to whip it into a frenzy. The group convened in the dark below once again.
This ogre of decree is hated by the free, and the relic he carry, like our gods, it is very...
We must take the charm back and induce an attack. Once faith is restored, the mob will be on board.
And what will be seen? Why, the return of our queen!
To be honest, it wasn't the craziest idea they could have come up with. Many religions of the distant past had even shakier foundations. After all, once the citizens equated the giant bag to the god they once revered, or at least the debag-headed ones thought they revered back when they were in charge, how could the citizens not back the debagged heads? And to follow the logic further, with all those millions of people wishing Lady Baghead back, how could their god not hear their cries in return? Seriously, this is solid religious reasoning. The Cabal built a camp at the bottom of the mountain hidden inside the crag. They found simpler clothes to wear and donned busted helmets like the common folk wore, but both eyes faced forward. To keep the beast unsuspecting, each night one of them went up the mountain to assure the beast the people finally understood what he meant and were grateful for his wisdom.
Thank you for your wisdom.
Skulk barely could believe it at first. But then, why would they send someone every day to thank him? After a few weeks, the ogre began to feel pretty good about himself. And as the debag-headed ones lulled the beast into a false sense of security, one of them would sneak behind the ogre's throne, past the motionless camel man, and pull a thread or two out of the giant bag in Skulk's massive hand. At the end of each night, the Cabal members washed each of the stolen threads thoroughly and attempted to reconstruct the bag it came from. They laid each thread into position on the ground of their massive cave, miles below the ogre they planned to overthrow. In only a few months, The Cabal had disassembled and rebuilt the artifact. The time for an end had come. A bonfire was built at the base of the mountain, drawing in citizens curious to see what was happening. There, on a pile of trash, the Cabal of Baghead stood in long red cloaks as the skies opened up and heavily wept for what was to come. Two of the members held up their newly remade Lady Baghead bag with arms stretched out, palms to the sky. A third stood in front of them and orated to the masses.
Our God is gone, and our night grows long. Yet the beast remains due to ill-gotten gains. It is all the ogre's fault. So his life we must halt.
And what will be seen? Why the return of our queen?
And with that, the Cabal gestured to the flaming garbage, offering the common citizens the opportunity of a false sense of taking back their city together, completely united against Skulk. From far beyond the city walls, if any one or thing were still out there, through the torrential rain, a line of fire could be seen crawling up the mountain. With flaming garbage in hand, the entire city called for Skulk's head yet again.
Puncturing our